The knock came at midnight. Not the polite kind of knock you expect from a neighbor borrowing sugar, the kind that rattles the glass in the door and jolts you upright like a gunshot. I padded barefoot across the tile, the house still smelling faintly of lilies from the funeral. My black dress hung over a chair in the corner, a ghost of the week I'd just lived through. When I opened the door, the porch light caught a flash of white, a thick envelope taped to the wood like a threat pinned to a tree. Final notice. I didn't even have the strength to curse. Just tore it open with shaking fingers, still raw from holding my mother's hand as she slipped away in hospice less than 48 hours earlier. Violation fees, $4,800. Foreclosure proceedings to commence in 10 days. The list was absurd. Grass too long. Mailbox color non-compliant. Unauthorized landscaping change. All violations dated while I was sitting 3 hours away, spoon-feeding my mother broth she couldn't swallow. I remember laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it was too grotesque to be real. I'd spent 18 years of my life sending criminals to prison, and now someone thought they could steal my home over half an inch of grass. I closed the door, slid down against it, and let the letter crumple in my hands. Grief has a weight, but injustice? Injustice is heavier. Meadowbrook Estates had always looked perfect from the outside. The kind of neighborhood realtors describe as quiet and tight-knit, with its identical ranch homes, trimmed hedges, and retirees who wave from porches like extras in an old movie. When I moved here 3 years ago, I'd told no one I was a federal judge. I wanted to be just Patricia, the woman with the forest green mailbox who complained about Netflix prices, watered her roses, and traded zucchini with the family next door. That night, sitting on my kitchen floor under the hum of a single fluorescent bulb, I realized something ugly. Someone in this quiet, tight-knit neighborhood had been watching. Not just watching, but waiting. Morning brought no peace. I stepped outside to find 3 neighbors pretending not to stare, their conversations clipped off mid-sentence when I waved. At the end of the street, a white Lexus idled too long before pulling away. The community center was holding an emergency HOA meeting that afternoon. No 7-day notice, no agenda, just a hastily printed flyer shoved in my mailbox with the same heavy-handed precision as that midnight letter. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. Folding chairs scraped across the floor as 50 people crammed into a space built for 30. At the front table, Brenda Kirkpatrick, HOA president, perfect hair, perfect nails, perfect smile sharpened like a knife, tapped her clipboard like a judge calling court to order. I stayed in the back row, unseen. For once, I wasn't the one holding the gavel. We're here to address a serious threat to our property values, Brenda declared, clicking through slides on an outdated projector. The images were of my lawn, my mailbox, my rosebush, all presented like evidence at trial. The room murmured. I caught fragments of whispers. Is she behind on dues? Didn't she just lose her mother? What's going on here? Brenda's voice cut through, sweet as battery acid. Violations are violations. We can't make exceptions, even for personal hardship. That was the moment something inside me stopped breaking and started hardening. Grief and fury fused into something sharper, something cold and precise. I rose from the chair, felt every eye swing toward me, and spoke not as a federal judge, not as Patricia Hawthorne, but as a homeowner with nothing left to lose. Before you finish your slideshow, I said evenly, I have some questions. The room went silent. Brenda's smile tightened, just enough for me to see the first hairline crack. Brenda didn't answer my questions. She didn't have to. She snapped her fingers at the young man beside her, nephew, assistant, whatever he was, and the next slide clicked onto the screen. My mailbox again, my lawn again. Documented violations, Brenda announced. 12 counts of property neglect. 6 counts of mailbox noncompliance. 1 unauthorized landscaping alteration. Her voice was calm, rehearsed. A weapon she'd sharpened through repetition. I held up a folder of receipts, approval emails, photographs. The HOA's own contractor mowed that lawn. The board approved that rosebush removal. I have written confirmation. Brenda didn't even glance down. Easily fabricated, she said. That single phrase hit harder than any gavel. 18 years on the federal bench, and no one, not a cartel lawyer, not a corrupt lobbyist, not a single defendant facing life in prison, had ever dismissed my integrity so casually. The vote took less than 30 seconds. 4 hands from the board rose to authorize enforcement action. No one in the audience had a say. The neighbors shifted uncomfortably, whispers spreading like brush fire. I stayed standing long enough to make eye contact with everyone who would look back, then sat heart steady but cold. They thought I would beg. They thought I would pay. The harassment began the next morning. 6 a.m. sharp, Brenda's white Lexus in my driveway, her clipboard snapping open like a weapon, her nephew measuring the angle of my car with a protractor, photographing imaginary flaws in my paint. Wednesday, my lawn service canceled without warning. Thursday, my pool card stopped working. Friday, my mailbox lock jammed, replaced for security reasons, according to a form letter. By Saturday, the message was clear. I was being isolated, squeezed. Made an example, but I'd spent nearly 2 decades watching organized criminals make the same mistake Brenda was making now. They thought intimidation would crush me. They didn't realize they were teaching me their patterns. Sunday afternoon, I took a long walk through Meadowbrook Estates, pretending to admire azaleas while cataloging the details Brenda didn't think anyone would notice. 3 homes with fresh for sale signs. 3 homes I remembered seeing violation letters taped to last winter. All 3 now empty, their lawns too perfect, like someone had staged them for photographs. At the corner of Birch Lane, I slowed. Through a picture window, I saw Florence Murphy, 82, clutching a letter just like mine. Tears streaked her weathered face as she stared at the paper in her trembling hands. That was the moment the knot in my stomach turned to iron. This wasn't about grass height or mailbox color. Brenda wasn't just targeting me. I started digging. The courthouse archives smelled like dust and old paper, the scent of forgotten truths. I traced property transfers and sale prices, my fingers running over records that revealed a pattern so bold it almost felt insulting. Homes cited for violations: rapid foreclosure, threats, quick sales, to a company called KCS Holdings Resale at full market value. And who owned KCS Holdings? A web of shell companies pointing back to Kirkpatrick Construction. Brenda's last name in every signature line, like graffiti on stolen property. When I stepped out of the courthouse into the fading afternoon light, my phone buzzed. Tom Bradley, a Vietnam veteran who'd been at the meeting, spoke low and urgent. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I've been tracking this too. 15 families, same routine. I've got names, dates, sale prices. You're not the first." His voice carried the weariness of someone who'd fought too many battles alone. When he handed me a folded paper an hour later, a handwritten list of addresses, I knew I'd just found my first ally. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by evidence, funeral flowers wilting in the corner. Grief still pressed against my ribs like a stone, but anger burned hotter. They thought I'd roll over. They thought I'd write a check, whisper, "Thank you," and vanish. Instead, I pulled out my phone and began recording a diary of everything. Names, dates, license plates, every word Brenda said, every letter she sent, every neighbor she targeted. I wasn't just fighting for my home anymore. I was fighting for every family she'd robbed. And for the first time since Mom died, I felt something other than grief. I felt purpose the first time Brenda came onto my porch without knocking. I was still in my pajamas. 6 a.m., cold coffee in hand, and there she was, clipboard pressed to her chest, a smile stretched too wide. Routine property wellness check. She chirped like this was some neighborhood welcome wagon instead of an ambush. Her nephew trailed behind, holding a plastic ruler like a weapon. I stayed inside, watching through the window as they photographed my siding, my driveway, even the tilt of my garden gnome. When she finally left, I found another envelope taped to the door. $900 fine, improper exterior ornamentation. A garden gnome. I laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh you share with friends. It was the brittle kind that cracks in your throat and makes your eyes burn. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Henderson's Lawn Service, the same contractor approved by the HOA. "Sorry, Mrs. Hawthorne, We have to terminate service immediately. We can't afford the liability. Liability? For mowing grass? Then the pool card stopped working. Then the mailbox key. One by one, the small conveniences of suburban life vanished until I felt like an exile living inside my own home. But Brenda had overplayed her hand. Harassment might scare ordinary homeowners, but I'd spent my career dismantling criminal rackets twice as ruthless as this. I returned to the courthouse archives the next day, armed with Tom Bradley's handwritten list of victimized families. The records told a story clearer than any confession. 23 homes targeted. $2 million stolen in equity. Every sale funneled through shell companies tied to Kirkpatrick Construction. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, a cold unease crept up my spine. This wasn't opportunism. This was organized theft, systematic, deliberate, and bigger than I imagined. As I was leaving, I heard a voice echo through the parking garage stairwell. We need to move on Hawthorne fast. File foreclosure paperwork tomorrow. My buyer's financing expires next month. Brenda. Her voice, sharp and nervous. What if she fights back? Someone whispered. Then we make her life hell until she gives up. Worked on 15 other families. My hand shook as I hit the record button on my phone. Grief gave way to something sharper, fury laced with adrenaline. That night, I spread the evidence across my dining table. Sale records, Tom's victim list, Brenda's voice caught on tape. The smell of funeral flowers still clung to the room, mixing with the bitter scent of cold coffee. I realized this wasn't just about my house anymore. Brenda was hunting the vulnerable, widows, retirees, families already on their knees. But then came the moment that truly broke something inside me. Margaret Morgan, a young mother from 3 streets over, knocked on my door, toddler balanced on her hip, fear written all over her face. She called me tonight, Margaret whispered. Brenda said I should reconsider supporting you. Margaret handed me her phone. The audio was crystal clear. Smart woman like you should think about her children. Accidents happen in neighborhoods. Kids play outside unsupervised. Would hate for anything unfortunate to occur. The words were ice water poured straight in my veins. Threatening me was one thing. Threatening a child? That crossed a line no one comes back from. I called Daniel Rodriguez, a local attorney who'd been quietly investigating HOA fraud. His office looked like an FBI crime scene, whiteboards, case files, photographs of stolen homes. Mrs. Hawthorne, you're the 7th homeowner I've seen this year, Rodriguez said grimly. Same tactics, same outcome. Brenda's building a development project. Your lot is the last piece she needs. How much profit? I asked. 300,000, maybe more. She's desperate, and desperate criminals are dangerous. Rodriguez leaned back, studying me. You're unusually calm for someone being hunted. I looked him dead in the eye. I've seen worse, and I'm not done yet. That night, staring at my ceiling in the dark, I stopped being Patricia, the grieving daughter, and became Judge Hawthorne again. I kept my title hidden for nearly 3 years, wanting to live as an ordinary neighbor. But ordinary neighbors were exactly who Brenda preyed upon. I reached for my phone and whispered into the recorder. Tomorrow, I stop playing defense. Tomorrow, I fight back. The turning point wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and absolute, like a gavel striking wood in an empty courtroom. The hunter had just chosen her prey. My dining room didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a war room. Legal pads stacked like sandbags. Property maps spread across the table. Red pins marking every family Brenda had targeted. Printed emails, violation letters, and bank records covered the walls like shrapnel frozen midair. Margaret Morgan sat at the table, bouncing her toddler on her knee while scanning spreadsheets. Tom Bradley leaned against the window frame, arms crossed, eyes on the street like he was back in a combat zone. Daniel Rodriguez scribbled notes on a yellow legal pad already full of evidence. She's stolen over $2 million in home equity, Margaret said quietly. 23 families. Average loss? 47 grand apiece. I looked at her little boy, asleep on her shoulder, his curls damp with sweat. Brenda's threat echoed in my head. Kids play outside unsupervised, would hate for anything unfortunate to occur. Then this ends now, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, calm, clipped like I was back on the bench handing down sentences. We built a plan as precise as a courtroom strategy. Step 1. Collect 45 homeowner signatures, enough to trigger emergency state oversight under Meadowbrook's original 1994 incorporation papers. Step 2. File formal complaints with the HOA Oversight Board citing systematic fraud and financial misconduct. Step 3. Present the evidence in a public meeting, giving Brenda a chance to resign voluntarily. And, when she refused, take her down in full view of the entire neighborhood. It sounded airtight on paper, but Brenda wasn't sitting still. The first warning came Thursday morning. Troublemaker spray painted across my mailbox in dripping red letters. By Friday night, all 4 of my tires were slashed in my driveway. By Sunday, anonymous letters appeared in my allies' mailboxes. Drop the campaign or face consequences. We know where your kids go to school. I installed security cameras around my house, high definition, motion triggered, the kind law enforcement dreams of. Every late-night prowl, every whispered conversation between Brenda and her nephew, every piece of suburban theater, captured and time-stamped. But the attacks didn't scare me. They infuriated me. Brenda had moved from fraud to outright intimidation, and now I had evidence of both. Then Florence Murphy knocked on my door. The frail 82-year-old widow who'd been Brenda's spy stood trembling in my doorway, tears streaking her cheeks. In her hand was a manila envelope. "Patricia," she whispered, "I can't do this anymore. I can't watch her destroy good people." Inside the envelope were dozens of violation reports, all forged with Florence's signature. "She paid me $5,000 to sign whatever she needed," Florence said, voice cracking. I was scared. I was broke after my husband died. But this is wrong. I took her hand. "Florence, you're doing the right thing now. Are you willing to testify?" She nodded, eyes clear despite the tears. "I'll tell everyone what she made me do." That night, as the clock ticked toward midnight, I sat alone at the war table and felt the weight of it all. My mother's voice whispered from memory, "Stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." But this wasn't just hard. This was dangerous. And for the first time, I questioned whether I had the right to drag my neighbors into this war. Rodriguez found me staring at the evidence wall the next morning. "You look like someone carrying the whole case alone," he said. "Because I am," I admitted. "If Brenda lashes out, I'm a target." "But she goes after Margaret's kid again," Rodriguez leaned forward, voice steady. "Patricia, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for every single person she crushed. And you're not alone anymore. Let's stand with you." Tuesday afternoon, Brenda called an emergency HOA meeting with 24 hours notice. Classic power move. The flyer said urgent infrastructure repairs, but we knew the truth. She planned to drain every last dollar from the HOA accounts before we could stop her. "Perfect," I told my team. "She's walking into our trap." We prepped evidence packets for every homeowner. Rodriguez filed restraining orders against further harassment. Tom coordinated live streaming for maximum visibility. Margaret updated our victim spreadsheets. Florence rehearsed her confession until her trembling voice carried steel. The trap was set. The pressure was unbearable. But deep down, I knew something Brenda didn't. I stopped being a victim the moment I stopped hiding who I really was. Tomorrow, I wouldn't walk into that meeting as a grieving homeowner. Tomorrow, I'd walk in as the federal judge she never saw coming. The community center was packed wall to wall, the air heavy with sweat and anticipation. Folding chairs scraped across linoleum as 50 neighbors crammed into a space built for 30. The projector buzzed, throwing pale light onto warped drywall. Brenda took her throne at the front table, clipboard clasped like a scepter, lipstick perfect, smile brittle. Beside her, her nephew Chad fidgeted with a stack of papers. A sheriff's deputy, her cousin, stood near the podium, his hand never far from his belt, trying to look official and failing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brenda began, voice carrying over the hum of fluorescent lights. "We have urgent business tonight. One homeowner has threatened this community with harassment and false accusations. Immediate action must be taken to protect our neighborhood." The words rippled through the room. Some neighbors shifted uneasily. Others folded their arms, uncertain whom to believe. Rodriguez sat beside me, evidence boxes at his feet. Margaret stood near the back, phone live-streaming to the neighborhood Facebook group. Tom Bradley hovered by the door, eyes scanning like a soldier on patrol. And Florence Murphy sat in the front row, clutching her confession in trembling hands. Brenda snapped her fingers, and Chad clicked through slides, photographs of my lawn, my mailbox, my driveway, spliced together like a crime scene. The deputy cleared his throat. Based on evidence provided, he announced reluctantly, I'm prepared to issue citations for harassment and trespassing. The crowd buzzed louder. Brenda's smirk widened. She thought the noose was around my neck. That's when Florence stood. Stop this nonsense, Brenda, she said, voice quivering but clear. I can't watch you lie anymore. Every head turned. Sit down, Florence, Brenda hissed. You're confused. I'm not confused, Florence said, holding up her manila envelope. I signed false violation reports because you paid me to. You forged my name on inspections. I never did. 5 years of fraud, Brenda. I'm done being your pawn. Gasps rippled through the room. The deputy stepped back from the table, like corruption might be contagious. Brenda's smile cracked into a snarl. She's senile, Brenda snapped. She doesn't know what she's saying, but Florence kept reading, voice rising with every word. Forged signatures, fabricated fines, systematic theft from grieving families. Enough, Brenda shouted, slamming her palm on the table. This meeting is over. No, I said, standing slowly. The room went silent, the kind of silence you can hear breathing. I walked to the podium, every step deliberate, every heartbeat steady. For 3 years, I'd hidden who I was. Not anymore. My name is Patricia Hawthorne, I said, voice calm, cutting through the murmurs. And I am a United States District Court judge. I pulled my badge from my purse. Under the harsh lights, the seal glinted like a blade. The silence was absolute. Even the fluorescent hum seemed to vanish. Brenda's face went dead white. The deputy took 3 long steps away from his cousin, suddenly realizing whose career he was about to gamble with. For 18 years, I've sent criminals to prison, I said evenly. And what I've witnessed here tonight isn't poor management. It's organized theft, federal fraud, racketeering. Neighbors murmured, then whispered, then erupted into open outrage. I turned to the deputy. Officer, the evidence you're holding is fabricated. I recommend you distance yourself immediately. His hand went to his radio. Dispatch, I need a detective unit at the Meadowbrook Community Center. Possible federal crimes in progress. Brenda lunged from her seat, shrieking. You can't do this. You're supposed to be neutral. This is entrapment. I didn't flinch. I raised my phone, speed dialed a number I knew by heart. FBI field office, I said into the silence. This is Judge Patricia Hawthorne. I'm witnessing a criminal conspiracy in progress. I need agents dispatched immediately. The words hit the room like thunder. Brenda froze. Her nephew dropped his clipboard. Florence wept openly. Margaret's live stream ticked past 200 viewers. You thought you could bully this community, I told Brenda, my voice sharp as a gavel strike. You preyed on widows, veterans, young families, anyone too scared to fight back. But you made one mistake. Brenda tried to bolt for the exit, but the deputy blocked her path. You picked the wrong house. The distant wail of approaching sirens rose in the humid night air. In 18 minutes, 2 black SUVs would arrive and end Brenda's empire in handcuffs. But in that charged moment, standing under buzzing lights in a packed community center, the neighborhood already knew the truth. The tyrant had fallen, and justice was no longer coming. It was here. The FBI agents arrived 18 minutes later, black SUVs gliding into the parking lot like silent verdicts. Special Agent Maria Santos, crisp as always, stepped through the doors with the calm authority that makes liars crumble before she even speaks. Judge Hawthorne, she nodded, eyes sweeping the crowded room. We've reviewed your recordings. We're taking it from here. Brenda didn't scream this time. She just stared at me, wild-eyed, as the handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists. Chad's shoulders slumped as he was led away. Her brother-in-law muttered something about lawyers that even he didn't seem to believe. Neighbors recorded everything. The flashing badges, the Miranda rights, the hollow collapse of Brenda Kirkpatrick's suburban empire. But in the middle of all that noise, I felt something quieter. Not triumph, not even relief, but a weight lifting from the chest of every family in that room. The predator had been unmasked. Justice moves faster when criminals hand you their confession in writing. Brenda pled guilty within 3 months. Racketeering, wire fraud, mail fraud, civil rights violations. 8 years in federal prison, no parole. Chad got 3. The brother-in-law lost his license and 5 years of freedom. But numbers don't tell the whole story. The restitution checks arrived one by one. $2.1 million in stolen equity returned to the families she bled dry. Tom Bradley's name was at the top of the list. Margaret Morgan's too. Florence Murphy, our frail, trembling witness, cried when I handed her the first check she'd seen with her own name on it in years. The neighborhood changed almost overnight. The old HOA board dissolved under state oversight. We elected a new one in a single evening. Every ballot counted out loud. Every financial record laid bare for anyone to see. Fees dropped. Trust returned. And laughter, real, unguarded laughter, returned to Meadowbrook streets. I stayed on, not as a judge, but as an unpaid constitutional advisor, making sure no one with a clipboard ever terrorized this community again. Margaret joined City Council. Tom started a veteran outreach program using the HOA's common spaces. Florence, shaky hands and all, became treasurer. Every dollar accounted for. Even my own settlement check didn't go into my pocket. It went into a scholarship fund in my mother's name, helping local kids pursue careers in public service. Every spring, when the first letters of acceptance arrive, I can almost hear Mom's voice. Stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. 6 months after the arrests, I walked through my garden on a quiet morning. The same corner lot Brenda tried to steal was full of blooming roses now, watered by neighbors who waved as I passed. Children splashed in the community pool. No gate locks, no restricted access, just joy ringing off the water. The mailbox that started this war, that forest green box Brenda swore was the wrong shade, stood exactly where it had always been. A neighbor's little girl pointed at it and asked, "Is that where the bad lady got caught?" I knelt down, smiling. "No, sweetheart," I said. "That's where the good people stood together." The story didn't end with Brenda's prison sentence. Local news called it the biggest HOA corruption case in state history. Law schools taught it as a case study in citizen rights. The FBI formed a task force to investigate similar schemes across the country. But the real legacy lives closer to home. At dusk, when the porch lights come on and the smell of barbecue drifts through the air, I see neighbors who once lived in fear sharing meals and stories instead. I see kids riding bikes down streets that used to feel hostile. And I see something you can't put a price on, a community that learned it was stronger together than any bully standing against it. I still get letters from strangers, families crushed by their own HOAs, asking for advice. I tell them the same thing every time. Document everything, organize your neighbors, and never assume you're powerless. Because power isn't a badge or a title. It's the courage to stand your ground when someone tries to take what's yours. On the morning of our first Neighborhood Justice Day festival, where we plant roses in memory of every family Brenda tried to destroy, I stood on my porch, breathing in the scent of fresh coffee and blooming flowers. The world had moved on, but I still glanced at that forest green mailbox, the quiet sentinel of everything we fought for, and whispered to myself, sometimes justice doesn't knock on your door. Sometimes you have to build it with your own hands. Then I smiled, because the laughter of children carried down the street, and I knew the fight had been worth every scar.